Hello there, Pash Sharma this side, bringing you the top 15 best chess games of Garry Kasparov. So, we have looked at 15 and 14, now we will look at game number 13. And guess what? This is one of my favorite games, but there are 12 other games as well, they are equally brilliant. So this one stands at number 13. This is the game between Garry Kasparov and Lajos Portisch, which was played in Niksic in 1983, and this is the fourth round game. So there were slight confusion whether Smyslov would play his candidates match. So in the honor of Gligorich's 60th birthday, although he didn't perform that well in the tournament, so Garry Kasparov was invited in that tournament, and he started well with 2.5 out of 3. And this is the fourth round game in 1983 against Lajos Portisch. So let's go. Kasparov is white, Portisch is black. Kasparov opens with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, and we see Queen's Indian defense. Knight c3, bishop e7, and now the favorite move of Petrosian against Queen's Indian, a3. And after the Kasparov-Karpov match in 1984, this came out. This became Kasparov-Petrosian variation because of that. And Kasparov always talks about this beautiful a3 move, which stops this bishop b4, pinning the knight, and still reinstates or states the claim in the center of the board. That's brilliant. So there we go, d5. Black does the same to stake the claim in the center, taking advantage of the time that white took to play a3, and the further time it will take to develop this slide square bishop and subsequent castling on the king side. But there we go, we are too far from that. C takes d, knight takes, and he can play e4 as well, but e3 is much more principled, just keeps everything controlled and protected safely. So Portisch exchanges, b takes, and that's the point of a3 to stop this bishop b4, and so that white can create a very good center in case of this exchange happens, and which we can see in this case. Bishop e7 preparing castling, bishop b5 check, c6 blocking the check, and bishop coming back to d3, taking time to play this so that this hinders the development of this knight through here, so it has to go there. So he has to play c5, and you cannot go here because then knight will come simply here, and this center looks better for black. So that's why Kasparov castles, and now knight c6. Bishop b2 is somewhat a move that you don't like because you are developing your poor bishop in front of these two pawns. Whether if it was here, then you can simply have played e4, although not possible at the moment, but in the meantime, when the tension resolves in the center, then e4 can come, and then you can develop this bishop to f4 or to g5. Excuse me. So Portisch takes the file, the C file. So basically you would like to open the C file and try to play, let's say, a5 or maybe castle, and then try to bring this rook into the middle. So that's the plan, that's why rook c8. Queen e2, castles, rook a1, just bringing this rook in front of the queen. So that was the main purpose of playing queen e2. Queen c7, and now this was a very critical moment in the game, and the next move really shocked Portisch, and this was a surprising move. And here comes Kasparov's novelty, c4, and moves like these can really put you off because now you are not prepared. You are somewhat prepared to play rook f d8, or to play, or if you're talking about white's perspective, you are prepared to play, let's say, bishop b1, bishop c2, or maybe let's say d5, or those sort of moves, or maybe rook c1. But c4 came as a big surprise, and Portisch didn't uh, deal with it very well. Beg your pardon. So best move here in this position would have been to play knight a5. But then comes d5, ed5, cd5, and c4. So black has its own counterplay. If white has its attack in the center, and the position would have been relatively equal. But after c4, and such a novelty really put Portisch off, and he didn't deal with it quite well, as I already mentioned, and he took the pawn. And this has significant differences in the position that you will see. E takes, and now threat is to play d5, and this knight has to find some good square, especially in the center. It won't be doing well on the back squares, so it had to go to a5. And now comes d5. Now the difference in this position and the position in the variation, as I put the final move of the variation here, the pawn is attacking the bishop, although these lines are open. Although these lines are open, but still this passed c pawn creates a lot of counterplay for black. But what happens in this variation, and we jump to the game. This is the game's variation. Look at this. These two pawns are really deadly. There is no passer for black, and suddenly these two bishops look really deadly. Not to forget, this pawn also shuts down this bishop. And queen f4 would have been a better move, just to bring his queen towards this fragile king side, since these bishops are raking across the board. And if queen also joins the party, then that would be dead end. But he doesn't deal with it well, and he takes the pawn on d5, and after c takes d5, bishop takes d5, there comes this shot. Can you guess it? Well, if you guessed it, brilliant. Otherwise, this was the shot that he missed. And there were some variations apart from this. Bishop takes h7 check, obviously king takes, then rook takes was the game. And after bishop takes d5, it was suggested after the game that knight d4 would also have been better move, but this is too complicated, and in those times no one did check with the computers, because we are talking about 1983, so it's too far back imagining about the computers. So g6, knight f5, obviously if pawn takes, then bishop takes, and everything is falling apart. So the best move would be to play rook fe8, bishop e5, and if you play queen c5, then knight h6 check, king f8, queen b2 would be decisive. And yep, that would have been better option. But in the game, after bishop takes d5, Kasparov plays bishop takes h7 check, which isn't bad either, which is one of good candidate moves in the position. King takes, and now rook takes d5. So what does he have? Equal pawns, but still has a tremendous counterplay, a tremendous attack. So king goes to g8. Otherwise, there would have been chances to play queen here, check, and things could have turned deadly dangerous. Also knight g5, and if bishop takes, then queen h5 would have been really annoying and deadly, because this g7 point is really loose. And talking about g7 point being very loose, let's have a quick look at two variations in this position, how white can approach this. Rook h5 is one of them. But after queen c2, queen takes e7, queen takes b2, knight e5, cutting the connection of this, and possible threats to play knight g6, queen h4, or maybe knight d7 for that matter. This would have been deadly. And another possible try would have been to play knight d2 in this position, but this would have been a bit inaccurate move, because after queen c6 the rook has to take the knight, pawn takes, queen c2, and after queen e5 still the position looks pretty much, I would say, equal, roughly equal. White would have chances. He would play f6, but then this check, and it would be difficult to assess how white would make progress in that position. But after king g8, Kasparov comes up with a very good idea indeed. Bishop takes g7, giving up the piece. King takes, and now knight e5, another spectacular move, not only making the way for the queen, but also interfering with the queen's path of coming here and coming to f4, especially to defend the king. And this is fantastic. Queen g4 is unstoppable. Rook fd8 was played, but now queen g4 is way too much for this bear king, with no pawns on g and h files. Both were taken off by those bishops, and we always talk about man-to-man comparison. If we talk about this bishop, well, there is no bishop on white side. We compare it to its fellow minor piece, probably equal. Rook probably equal. This rook to this rook probably equal. This queen somewhat out of the play, but still it is there. It's proving something. But what is this knight doing? No job at all. So on the board it looks like white is a piece down, but actually the material is equal, and I would say he's a pawn up. Or maybe queen isn't serving well, so maybe he's, I would say, a rook up in the position, looking at the board, the function it is serving. So we always try to do man-to-man comparison of the pieces, that okay, you give something, but in return you have is the activity. The piece might look like the material is on the board, but actually if it isn't doing something, it's absolutely worth nothing. And that's the point in this case. This knight is absolutely worth nothing. So coming back to the game, queen is checked, and king cannot go to h5, because let's try if he goes to h7, then queen h5 check, king g8, queen takes f7 check, king h8, and knight g6 is mate. And if he goes to h8, well, this is even quicker. Knight takes f7, king h7, and rook h5 is mate. So the only move to keep, obviously, if you bring the bishop, you will just simply take it. So king f8 is somewhat forced. Queen f5 threatening mate in 1. f6 is forced to defend mate. And after, by the way, I should say, after queen f5, if you have played bishop d6, defending mate like that, but then queen f6 would have been deadly dangerous. And if you try to bring your knight to c6 just to bring this piece to store some parity, well, that doesn't work. Knight g6 check, king e8, and rook e1 is crushing. So after queen f5, f6 was somewhat forced, and there comes another of this beautiful move from Kasparov, knight d7 check, and there isn't any good square to go to. King e8, then queen g6 is mate actually, and another option is to play king g8, but then queen g6 check, king h8 is the only move, and rook h5 is mate in 2. What can we do after knight d7? King f7, but then comes queen h7 check, king e6, and rook e1 check. And the only way only good way to defend this would have been to play queen e5 to give up your queen. Knight takes, and the position is bad for black. And after rook e1 check, if you become greedy and if you play king takes rook, well, this lands into a very good mating attack. Queen e4 check, king d6 is the only move, and rook d1 is checkmate right in the middle of the board. So after knight d7, Portisch had to give the exchange. Rook takes, and now this is a very critical moment here, and it's obviously quite evident how Portisch is somewhat done in this position, and he couldn't come up with a good move. And we will see, we will check the variation after that. So the move that he played was queen c5, and this was a critical error, because after queen h7, rook c7, and there is a very pretty threat here. If you go rook d3 now, well, if your tactics are good, you might have spotted it, and if you just want to see what would happen, then there is this beautiful shot that Portisch had in his mind. Queen takes f2 check, and after king takes f2, bishop c5 check, just opening this line, and the material would have been equal. And after this queen takes f2 check, if you play rook takes, then rook c1 check will be the end of the world, because if you bring the rook back, then bishop c5 check is totally crushing. You won't be able to do anything, and that would be simply checkmate. So that's why after rook c7, Kasparov played queen h8 check to come out of this witty trick, king f7, and now rook d3, just preparing this rook g3 or maybe rook here, and there are already some witty tricks going on, and also defending this rook into this line and still taking claim of this d file. Now coming back to this move, rook takes d7, and as I said, queen c5 was a blunder. Now the best move that we could have played is queen e5, and what's the difference there? Queen h7, rook c7, the same thing that happened in the game. Queen h8 check, although there wasn't any this thing landing on f2, but queen h8 check, king f7, rook d3. There is this difference, because the queen is not on c5, it's on e5. He can play rook c3 and still keeping pressure on white, although it's still better for white, but with a piece down, it's absolutely not easy to calculate, or maybe I should say two minor pieces for a rook. It's still not easy how white would have been able to hold this position, but queen c5 was played, and this rook c3 move was not possible. So after rook takes d7, he played queen c5, queen h7, rook c7, queen h8 check, king f7, rook d3. We stopped here, and now we continue. Probably he could have played bishop f8 to try to play this move, but he plays knight c4, and before going to g3 he could have played rook fd1. That's a good move. He played rook fd1, and now he could have played bishop d6, just try to create some counter-attacking options. Probably it would have been too late, but here after rook fd1 he just blown the game up by playing knight e5, and from here we see Kasparov's calculation brilliance. Queen h7 check, and if king goes here, then this would be disastrous. Let's see, king e8, queen g8 check, and if you play bishop f8, then queen e6 check is game over. You bring anything in between, but that won't have mattered because rook d8 would be mate. So after queen h7 check, also by the way, after king f8, then rook d8 would be mate on the next turn. So king e6 is somewhat forced, and now comes this queen g8 check. And the best move in this position would have been just to bring the knight back. Probably that would have held the game up. But the king was on the long journey, on the long walk, and Kasparov made sure that he will catch the king in his net. King f5, g4 check, and the only move is king f4. If king e4, then this rook comes here, and that would be end of the world. Or maybe not here, but probably queen h7 would be the end. So king f4, now rook d4 check, and it's looking really bad for Portisch. After king f3, can you guess the move which Kasparov played to wrap this game up? Well, if you've guessed it, brilliant. And if you just want to enjoy the show, as I say, is queen b3 check, and after which Portisch resigned the game. Well, what a beautiful game this was by Garry Kasparov. And it hasn't happened once that Kasparov has made a king walk this way. And it's one of those brilliant games by Kasparov that's why you admire him. Okay, what's the point? If you play knight here, then that would simply be taken by queen, and that would be mate in one actually. If knight here, then queen takes, game over. And the only move would be to play queen c3, but there is some beautiful mating combination here. Queen d5 check, king e2, queen e4 check, queen block is the only move, and queen takes e3 would be mate. So it all came down to this, and yeah, this game was published all around the world, and probably that was the game of the year. Brilliant game by Kasparov, which was game number 13. So this was my favorite game number 13 from the series of top 15 Garry Kasparov games. I hope you liked my video. I hope you liked my analysis. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Cheers. Bye.